think that the whole process, I mean, you heard about the process at BBC being the most strict, I think, and EMI, that they really train their engineers on through, you know, and I would say that it's a good point what you're saying there about Bing Crosby and that number 4. We recorded, it's documented that we did play in studio number 4, which meant that they had 3 other studios anyway in that building. But the engineers would have done orchestral sessions and, you know, classical music, I'm sure, between the engineers that they had. I mean, I don't know how many they had in their whole roster of engineers, but I'm pretty certain that the engineers that were doing our work would have done jazz sessions, they'd have done folk music, they'd have done rock, they probably did skiffle at one point. So to go in with something which was this sort of avant-garde for them to listen to, because it really is, I mean, the whole thing, we're absolutely fearless on these sessions, as you can hear, and there's just this whole energy. I mean, the thing is, these guys were real professionals, and they took it on board, and I think they did a really, really good job, considering it's only recorded for, like, probably only one broadcast, they're thinking at the time. And here we are all these years later listening to it.
Yeah, you say it's fearless. I mean, it's so fresh. And you can feel the freedom that you had. Yeah. So there was no producer saying, hey, guys, this is a bit too way out. You had the freedom to record pretty much what you wanted.
Well, I guess we did. Yeah, we did. And of course, I didn't know what they were going to be confronted with. But for instance, that Dazed and Confused on there, when we initially did the sessions, we'd sort of go in there with Communication Breakdown and Dazed and Confused, because it gave 2 sides of the coin of what we were doing, and, you know, dynamics of Dazed and Confused. I thought that was a really well recorded version, actually, to be honest with you. I thought that was really good. But it also got to the point, so that's what we would do, because, you know, you thought maybe they'd only play the one number, so you had the shorter one, the Communication Breakdown, and hope that you get more stuff played. But there was usually about 3, maybe even 4 songs that were recorded on the session, and then we started sort of promoting, because it was our only way of promotion, but then we'd start making up numbers as well. And across the package here, there's 3 numbers that get made up in the studio, and it's literally, well, here's the riff, 1, 2, 3, 4, let's go. And there's the one called Sunshine Woman, which opened all this up. And then there's another one called The Girl I Love Has Long Black Wavy Hair. And then one which is probably a little more familiar to people, which is the Travelling Riverside Blues. And they were literally made up in the studio, and people were sort of curious as to, well, how come you didn't record those afterwards in the, you know, in the studio, like here or whatever, you know. The simple reason was because we were creating music so freely, I guess. You know, it was just sort of pouring out, that those things were just for that moment, and then we'd be moving on to something else. That was very much like Led Zeppelin sort of ethos, really.
Your manager, Peter Grant, he hated all this bootlegging that was going on in those days. I mean, it's kind of ironic that you wouldn't have had Sunshine Woman were it not for somebody in Eastern Europe recording it off the radio.
Yeah, and the bootleg market, that's absolutely correct, yeah. But now we've covered the bootleg market, because we've got everything now on this, all right?
And what kind of detective work was involved in finding all these tapes? Were they kind of buried away in vaults somewhere, or?
Well, the BBC, you know, it's not like I had this stuff. It's basically it's property of the BBC. So no, there was a request made. Can you send over what analogue you have, basically, because you want to work from analogue if you can. And some analogue tapes arrived, and some DAT tapes arrived as well, which is the sort of digital cassette type of thing. But yeah, they had them, and then they came over, and I had actually nearly 20 years ago done CD versions of the BBC sessions, and there was a lot of material that was left off because of the amount that you could get on a CD. So what with the renaissance of vinyl now, it was sort of crying out to have this, to tackle this after all the, I want to really put it in context after all of the releases of the studio albums and the companion disc, which gave such a complete sort of audio picture, like a panoramic picture really of the what was being done in the studio at each time that the albums were being done. It gave so much more information. But this BBC sort of little nutmeg really is just it's just really great, because you hear the band really just going for it, fearless, and you can just hear the energy of it. It's undeniable.
Because, I mean, you were very much, before Led Zeppelin and the Yardbirds, you were very much in demand session guitarist. So you were used to the discipline of having to go in and just deliver straight away. I mean, didn't you do a session for the BBC with backing Tom Jones?
Well, yeah, that's one. I'd actually been at this Maida Vale studio and the Aeolian Hall on a number of occasions with various ways the studio musicians got called in because they played on the records, and, you just sort of do, like, again, a couple of hours or whatever it was, and it was no more, no less, really, for Led Zeppelin, but we were going to go in there as opposed to just having a chart to read. We were making up music as we went, so all of those, the overdubs and things, were all different from what were it's a rough approximation of what was on the records, but you can hear that it's improvising all the way.
I mean, there's a shot there of one of the studio mixing desks with about 6 channels on it. Yeah. I mean, it all looks so primitive now.
Yeah, but it's good old analog, though. Yeah, well, I'm not sure whether we just mentioned this, but those recordings are mono all the way through to the last 2, Since I've Been Loving You and Stairway, and I think the engineers did a really, really great job, because they never would have expected us to be playing it with this sort of system, and it holds up.
How really different does what we heard tonight compared to the original BBC session tapes that you first got?
The running order is obviously totally different to how is it? Yeah, it is. It's moved around a little bit from what the broadcasts are, but it's clearly noted what is what, and the John Peel session, the 1971 one, that's pretty complete. But there were a few things left off of the 20-year-old CD version, which got made into like an extra disc, like another 2 sides of vinyl and another CD. But yeah, then it was sort of mastered over at with John Davis and at Metropolis. And that's it really. That's the sort of process of it. So, and then the vinyl was cut and everything else,
A lot of these tapes have been in their boxes, sitting on a shelf for years and years and years, 40-odd years plus. There's a technical question. Often on tapes, you get like an imprint of sound, on the tape, which you can sometimes hear before it gets to the playback.
Like a print through.
Yeah. Was that a problem?
No, not on the BBC versions of things. No. But I know what you mean. Yeah, we've had. You get print through on things. Yeah. On analog tape, that is. Yeah.
And what kind of setup was it in the studio? I mean, now people spend, they can spend 3 hours getting a bass drum sound. What sort of mic setup was around the drum kit, for instance?
Well, it was pretty simple. It didn't have a nest of microphones around it. With John's drums, you really only needed sort of overhead microphones, and possibly something on the bass drum and something to cover the snare. He had such a natural balance with his playing that you just really needed to give the microphone space to be able to get the acoustics of the instrument. John Paul Jones and I had been session musicians, so we were used to going to the BBC and working under those sort of, and as session musicians working under those sort of controlled conditions where every second literally is costing money. So we were always very efficient in the recording, because John was really super fast as well, John Bonham. You know, there was no messing about all the way through any sort of recording anyway. So from the first album to the last, and it's these sessions were done really, really efficiency. You know, it's a ruthless efficiency that was applied to things. Really,
there's no hanging around saying, "Oh, we'll have another beer, fellas," and they sort of
no.
None of that.
No. Well, you know, we got invited back like 4 times before we passed the audition, so we weren't going in there pissed.
What was your favourite studio?
Oh, I quite like the Maida Vale one, actually. That was really good. You've seen like the Playhouse coming up there where things were recorded, and that was a theatre which is down on the embankment. And actually, it's back to a theatre now. It still has theatrical productions there. I first played there with the Yardbirds, and curiously enough, on that, it was the Bee Gees were on that. That was the first recording, I think, for BBC. But at the time, they would have it was a theatre, so it had all the seating in it, but there was no audience. It was just basically, I guess, the mic'd up for comedy shows and things like that. And I guess they'd have a little band, but they had for the theme tunes and all of that. So they had a whole microphone or recording facility there. So you'd go and record on the stage to like an empty house. But that was a Playhouse theatre.
But that it was like doing a gig because all the band's up there on the stage. But
yeah.
To an empty theatre, wasn't that a bit weird?
Well, it was odd, but then eventually it did fill up for the one night stand or whichever one it is, and then the Paris Theatre, isn't it, for the last one? That was with audiences, but it was odd. But nevertheless, it's just the same as the recording process of recording an album or whatever. You just go in there and you just, use like a consciousness between you all, and you're just working.
I mean, were you worried about people taping them on the radio and? Doing these amazing sessions that could just get broadcast, people could just tape them, I guess.
Well, it didn't really matter at the time, anyone who was doing home recording, well, there was nothing wrong with that. It didn't seem to be a problem. I guess the problem when you're thinking about the aspect of, there was like tape sharing between people, but then there were people who were quite mercenary about it and making money out of bootlegs. And the fact was, you'd see packaging of something, you didn't really know what was inside it, and you'd have like a concert that was recorded on like the smallest little dictating machine, and you'd find the batteries were slowing down halfway through it, and the speed was changing. Yet you wouldn't know, and you'd be paying the really exorbitant price for these things. So, yeah, I started to get a bit annoyed with the bootleg market. In fact, I got very annoyed with the bootleg market. Especially after having done all of the last set of releases, because I was combing the bootleg market to see what there was out there as far as studio recordings. And as I say, I was combing everything to make sure that what we were going to put out on our releases and the companion discs were as best as possible, things that had never even been heard before. So I was really keen on that. But then once everything came out, and I sort of went to a bootleg shop in Japan, where I might add they're allowed to sell bootlegs legitimately, providing they've got some proper, proper releases from record companies in there, like legit stuff. So they, as you can imagine, it's a big shop. They've got about that much legit, and everything else is bootleg. And I started to get a bit annoyed with that when I saw a friend of mine who was out there touring in Japan, and they already had a DVD as what he was doing, and before he'd even hit the Tokyo, and I thought, this just isn't on.
Yeah. Was this a labour of love for you to get all these the complete sessions together? You seem very excited about the whole thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a historical document. It's sort of Led Zeppelin's promotion. It's them going full throttle at what they're taking no prisoners when they're going in on these sessions, and yet it's still employing all the dynamics and the improvisation. Yeah, it's an important document because there isn't anywhere else in the world where there was something like the BBC. So it's really great that they gave us a facility and repeat facility to be coming back, and that there's a testament to it, because I know some people really like some of these versions. I think they're really great. I think they're pretty cool.
Yeah. There's a great freshness to them, and enthusiasm. So now they're out. I guess the vault is closed. That's it. Complete BBC sessions. You've remastered all the studio albums.
There's the BBC sessions. That's complete now. As it says, it's the complete sessions. Thank goodness for that. Eh? You know, because it's really great. It's a great time capsule. It's really cool, and you hear the band sort of progressing over just to, you know, not even a handful of years, just from 1969 to 1971. My goodness, it's only 2 years, and yet it's expanding and expanding. It's cool. That's it for the BBC. And the studio stuff, we've done all of that. So I've been doing this for quite a while, because what you have to understand is, with all of those companion discs, it all takes listening in real time. There's no shortcuts. So I've been involved in it for quite a while, and that's good. So maybe it's time to sort of dust down the guitar for next year, I think. Yeah,
that's good news.
Yeah.
Jimmy Page, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, and thank you, Johnny. Thank you.
And we're going to end this evening, and people here at Olympic Studios will see this, as will people watching on Facebook, with an exclusive showing of a brand new video. Coming right up.